Hello, I'm Marky Dragon, also known as Marcus Eikenberry in real life, and welcome back again, Mr. Richard Garriott. I say that wrong. I tried to do this and be really smart about it last time and get you to say, hello, I'm Lord British, also known as Richard Garriott in real life.
Yeah.
I mess it up every time. I mess it up for myself sometimes, too. So...
It's funny how whenever you have role players who have pseudonyms, you always have to worry about which name are we going to use.
This is true. This is true, and I've learned that with my parents and my family, I use my real name, but I still get stopped. This probably happens to you. You'll be in the grocery store or something like that, and then somebody will be like, "Lord British."
Yeah. Well, in fact, I had it happen just the other day. I was taking my wife out for a nice steak dinner in New York City, and we're at the bar waiting for our table, and we happened to sit down next to another couple who started saying "Lord British, Lord British" a little louder and louder until they had to get our attention. And it was actually somebody from I think the Netherlands, way overseas, who just happened to be in New York for like 2 days on vacation, and they were already backers of the Shroud of the Avatar Kickstarter. And
wow.
so we had a great conversation right there, just randomly on the streets of New York.
Yeah, isn't that fun? Except for when they're a little creepy.
And as you may know, I've actually had a couple of home invasions even. So
no, I didn't know about that. Yes, that's actually you have a lot more fame than I do in the video game industry. But yes, I have had some really weird things happen as well. Women showing up at my door, talking to my wife, stuff like that. So.
Oh, I bet your wife loved that.
Yeah, she was not amused. So let's talk about the game, Shroud of the Avatar.
Great.
And so now, Shroud of the Avatar is, of course, the next game that you're working on. It's on Kickstarter right now. And you can go shroudoftheavatar.com and make your pledge either on the site or at Kickstarter. And is this game, for those who have not seen any of the previous videos, is this game a Ultima successor, or what is this game?
Well, I call it the spiritual successor to Ultima. It can't be a directly derivative work because since I sold Ultima to Electronic Arts, but Lord British is still in it, and all the game design principles that I believe in are still in it. And so the way I describe it is I say, look, I'm going to tell a deep story about virtues that reflects to you your behavior akin to Ultima 4. I'm going to create a detailed virtual world where every object that you can want to interact with, every object you see that looks like it could be interacted with is interactive, like Ultima 7. And it also includes multiplayer. It's sort of a calling it an MMO is not quite accurate because it's at least a new type of MMO, if you want to call it that. At least I believe
Light
it is.
MMO?
Well, I'm not even sure light is really quite the right word. It's instead of splitting it up into normally if you try to put everybody together in an MMO, you have to end up sharding the world. Shard is a common term now that really comes from Ultima mythology, but so you end up being separated from other friends you actually have who happen to have started on a different shard. So we're pulling everything together into one mega shard, so to speak, but we're doing rapid iterations of shards. Every time you change maps, it kind of repopulates who you're in that little mini shard with. So it's a new type of MMO that I think will give even better gameplay.
So one of the things that I was most worried about when I saw about how this player interaction was going to work is how do I make sure that I see my friends?
Yeah, and so so first of all, anyone that you've ever told us is a friend of yours, so we need you to somehow indicate who your friends are. But that can be anything from if you give us access to your friends graph on any social network you're part of, Facebook, G+, LinkedIn, your email list.
LinkedIn. Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
all my business contacts.
But whatever you would like, any of those friends that you give us, we will make sure they're on that short list. Plus, we'll let you identify people in game and say, type in their name and search for them and say, hey, that's my friend. So anytime you indicate to us by whatever tools you can that these are the group of people that I know that I like, then we'll make sure those are the first people we search for as you move from map to map. If there's already one of your friends that is in that instance, so to speak, you will join them immediately. But also, depending on how you've set this selectable level of multiplayer, you can tune it to where, look, I really only want to see my friends, or I'm willing to see my friends' friends, which is at least we have something related, to each other, or frankly, I'm happy to see strangers also. So we'll
happy to make new friends.
Exactly, to make new friends. And so if you leave it in the nominal MMO-ish kind of gameplay, it just means that your world will still be as full and frequent with people as any other MMO. We just favor the people who you told us before we kind of run out of room to hold that many people in a map. And
what is the number of, when we've got big guilds and everything, what is the running out of room? At what point do my friends start getting denied on being in the same area with me?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly what that limit will be because we haven't got enough code running and players in to know where it peaks out. But our guess is it'll be in some reasonable number of tens of people in one map area at a time. I don't think it's going to be hundreds of people in one map area at a time. So that's at least a guess. But until we a little further, we won't know precisely.
I think primarily the core number of people being around you is probably good, but there are always so you remember, I know you remember in Ultima Online when a house would fall, and we used to actually get gangs of people out there all hidden, just waiting for the house to fall, and we would be hiding our dragons at the same time. Because especially if it was in non-PvP territory, you couldn't attack them. So we would all hide there, and then as soon as the house fell, all of us would stay hidden, except we'd all release our dragons. And it would wipe out everybody that was there, and then we'd just pick up all the loot and place our new house and be on with it.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
But I guess I'm just saying I look forward to an experience like that where we can have a whole bunch of people together and the whole risk-reward thing. Of course.
And of course, if we find out that we're not fulfilling some gameplay need, then we'll work to improve it to where we fulfill that gameplay need. We just think that there's the natural comfortable level we're guessing will be some number of dozens versus some number of gross, to use an old English metaphor.
Yeah. So now one other thing that I've seen that's on people's mind, and is on my mind, is the map. And I think you guys have actually discussed it a bit. Ah, yes. Is that cloth or is that paper?
It's cloth. Cloth.
All right.
Look, here's some threads pulling off of it. It's cloth.
Yes, I always appreciated the cloth maps. I have a few behind me here.
I know, that's what I saw. That's, before we went online, I was going, hey, I've got the new one for your collection there. I need to stick that one up behind you.
Well,
there's currently only 3 of these in existence, so this is one of 3 at the moment.
Wow. Well, I'll be happy to put one up. So with the map, now one of the concerns that I have, and you may have already addressed this in some other live stream or whatnot, but one of the concerns that I have is that part of my play style is I love to adventure. And adventure means walking along, taking a look at all the surroundings, and finding my way, maybe not even knowing where I'm going, just headed in a direction, and see, I don't know, what attacks me, or what jumps out from behind a tree. And now with the overhead map view that you've got, and the whole fog of war thing, will I be able to just not use that map and just walk my way everywhere, or how's that going to work?
So our current expectation is that you will need to use the overhead map to continue. Although we're looking at a variety of other options also, since people have asked about that a fair bit. But the current intention is that the outdoor. By the way, the outdoor map is not small. And if you go to think about Ultima 4, 5, 6, and I think 7 was the first time it was a monoscale map. In 4, 5, and 6 they had that dual scale map. And I still believe you were exploring. So, and I still believe in this case you will explore. Not only will you be able to walk along, and in some cases, like you might be passing over a bridge, and you might a troll encounter might be invoked, or you might be walking along the shoreline of the mountains, and you'll see a sea monster approaching the shore, and if it might come up and attack you. Same thing with the dragon you've probably seen flying around. It would then take you into a combat arena. Plus, also, any of those individual hexes can be entered. And they're all places to explore. And so as a case study that I'm sure will build almost exactly like I'm describing it, if you go out into the swamps at night when there's a full moon and it happens to be raining, that might be the best place to go look for nightshade, for example. And that would mean that if you at night when it's raining, you'll want to head over to the swamps and go into the swamp and zoom into the swamp and start exploring around. And you might find encounters, you might find nightshade or other special reagents. So I think that you'll have plenty of opportunity for. And I agree with you. That's the way I often like to play. That was actually one of my frustrations, even with a lot of the current MMOs, is that have the level fence so carefully built around you, is that you really can't go off and just explore wherever you want.
Right. Right. So, okay. Well, I guess I'll just be pleasantly surprised at whatever it is whenever I get my first login to the game.
Excellent.
Now, you mentioned reagents. Oh, Dr. Pepper. For the win.
Absolutely.
Brilliant minds think alike. What
Exactly.
can we say? What can we say? So, the reagents. What are we looking at for a spell system?
So we know the foundation of the spell system will be what I will call familiar to people who've played my earlier games. It will include metaphors like a relatively small or modest set of reagents that are used in a logical fashion as supplies for spells, and it will include logo-style words of power to where you can begin to remember the names of the spells. And so if you hear, Flam Hur, that's a flame wind in Latin root terms, and that if we do something like a flaming wind spell, it would include things like sulphurous ash and things like blood moss for the movement. So people will find that we'll probably build some new reagents, and we'll probably build some new logos words, but conceptually you'll find it familiar as a basis. The part we haven't worked out yet is what I'll call research and discovery and creation parts of magic, and that's something we definitely want to include. We just aren't far enough along in our deliberations here in the other office to be able to tell you much about that. Other than that, yes, it is our intention to allow discovery and creation in the magic system.
I especially liked in UO, whenever casting a spell, that you would see corp pour from somebody else, and you'd be, oh shit, I gotta run.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And it would appear above their head or whatever, if I remember right.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah, and by the way, and that way, even the person who's not the magic user, they'll get used to some of those terms, and so they'll be able to tell what's going on. Exactly. So those I think are kind of fundamental design premises that are part of the Lord British design that we're.
Other games are very mechanical with that. I mean, you just don't see it. You just press a button and it happens or whatever. But this is an extra in there, but it gives it a lot of flavor.
Exactly.
So, and that's why we keep coming back. It's like Ultima is a great restaurant.
Right.
And you're the chef. So we're looking at this next great meal you're going to whip up.
That is exactly the plan, and that's why even a year and a half ago, or about maybe a year ago, I put up that kind of treatise on our website of what is a Lord British ultimate role-playing game, just to kind of outline my key message of here's the things that I believe transcend Ultima the game into design principles that go into any game that I would plan to create, especially in the medieval fantasy genre.
How has art in real life influenced your design on the game?
Arts in real life?
Yeah, like either paintings or music or I see a heavy influence on that, and so I suspect that maybe you appreciate a lot of different types of arts outside of the game.
I do, and but in fact, it's interesting. As we were sitting down and thinking about the game, I look around my own house because I'm a avid collector of all kinds of things. But it's interesting to look around at that pantheon that I've surrounded myself with, and of course, I have swords and crossbows and armor, as any good medievalist would want to have, around their house. I, of course, also have some space artifacts, understandably from my personal and family history. Mm-hmm. But I also then have this next level of things that go beyond that, and that's I have a bunch of I collect automatons, little mechanical models that perform little scenes and skits. A lot of those are kind of Victorian looking. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of Victorian looking science fiction, science demonstration apparatus. Just because I think mechanical orreries, things that make the planets all move around, and in a fantasy sense might look like that big orrery in the Dark Crystal, for example. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of found object art that is a bit macabre. Like I have these octopus tentacles in these test tubes mounted on a wall. It looks really Jules Vernean mad scientist look. And so that's a little bit, these kind of unusual, bizarre, slightly macabre pieces of art that I realized I had this kind of fascination with, but I've never manifested into the games. That's what we're trying to figure out a way to describe it and capture it and bring it into the medieval, because I think it's very compatible. I know a lot of people are worried about the word steampunk, and I'm very careful actually not to use that word to describe this. That's not what we're specifically doing, but I am trying to bring in more of this, just an unusual flair. Just take it slightly outside of the, yep, there's another sword, yep, there's another crossbow. We're trying to create a more unique pattern in the visuals that we're creating. And you're only just beginning to see that now in our concept sketches. As we told a lot of people at the beginning of the prototype we put up at the beginning of the Kickstarter, almost all that art was stuff we found on the Unity art store. So it was literally prototype that literally we did not make and was completely generic, versus something as epic and unique as we're now trying to get out in our concept sketches so people see where we're headed.
Yeah, that's actually one thing that I did a couple of videos that showed just a little bit of the prototype gameplay. And there was a lot of comments from people that didn't understand that it was prototype. And they're like, this game sucks. Look at it. Mm-hmm. And of course, I know what it is. And I mention in there that what it is, that it's not the finished product or anything. And but it's funny how people react to that. And so now I understand that. Now, I guess, would you have made a prototype video or a prototype of the game or whatnot if Kickstarter did not require that?
Probably so, just because before you can really start making final art, you sort of need to know, where is the camera going to be, what is the scale going to be, how is movement going to happen. And so, by the way, we went through a bunch of iterations of even those fundamental questions. Like, for example, we bought and or built a number of pieces of prototype art. For example, in the old-fashioned UO, you go inside a house and the roof pops off. And so for a while, we had a fixed top-down camera. So when you walked into a house, we had to pop the roof off. Mm-hmm. And so we had whole iterations of the game working that way. We had whole iterations of the game where it was top-down and camera could rotate, or top-down and the north was fixed in one direction. And was that north to the top of the screen, or really that diagonal that lets you get a three-quarter view, a diamond-shaped pattern for a house? I mean, we went through all of these different tests, and then ultimately the reason why we went to kind of a point of view, really a full 3D viewpoint, is because one of the big story pieces that I really want to tell well is how weather and astronomy affects gameplay. Not only, like I just already mentioned, that on full moon nights when it happens to be raining, can you go find nightshade, but it's also during new moon nights when it's the darkest, is when the evil rises and starts taking over the towns. And you saw one of those sieges on one of the towns in the prototype. That's to showcase what happens on these other special occasions. And so because we wanted you to be able to look up into the sky and see the phases of the moon and see the other astronomical signs of that might be fulfilling or driving a variety of prophecies we have in the game, we needed to be able to look around.
Mm-hmm. So I heard something about. I was just thinking about. My wife talked a lot about the point of view, and she never played any of the Ultimas. And she wasn't so sure she liked this 3/4 overview, and she'd like, can I get into first person? And but you know, so and I'm like, well, it'll be whatever it's going to be. But
and we thought about that too, and we don't have any problem with going to first person. We just haven't tried to test yet whether the game will fully be practical to play that way. But obviously, once you're in true 3D, it's pretty easy to zoom the camera all the way into your eyeballs and zoom it back out to a little overhead. The reason why, generally speaking, in a role-playing game, I like a little bit more distance is so you can see what's happening behind you. But you know, we're not far away from that right now. We are going to do full 3D. And so we've talked already about whether that really also means you go to truly first person. I don't really have a problem with it. We just haven't really done far enough into the testing to state, you know, reliably whether you can count on us to make that the, you know, a viable dominant way to play. We don't know that yet.
So I heard somebody say "Lady British" the other day.
Yes, well, of course, I really am married now, and I really have a baby, and so
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very kindly. In fact, I think I've got I think I've got the Bambino picture here still on the back of my phone. So, and so so the real Lady British is Lord British's wife, and so yes, you will see. In fact, we were crafting some of the details of my wife's role within the gameplay the other day with our story writer, my writing partner, Tracy Hickman.
How does your wife feel about what you do for a living? Does she feel that this is all very fascinating, or is she like, there he goes again?
I think it's a little bit of both, because but you know, she's definitely not a hardcore gamer herself. But you know, what's interesting is I think everybody on Earth now is a gamer. They just aren't necessarily willing to admit it. And just like I think everybody's a collector, whether or not they're willing to admit it. So my wife definitely has a fascination with it, and she loves to brainstorm, you know, with ideas about the game. But of course, since she's not really a hardcore gamer, it means the context of her brainstorming is often brilliant, because it comes from the perspective of, you know, of not being adulterated by what happened before,
right.
and often just as often well, yeah, we already know that part because we've done that for the last 10 years. But she enjoys listening in on brainstorming discussions and contributing where she can.
So we have just what is it, 3 days left?
3 days.
3 days left. And what are we at? 1.4 million right now, something like that.
We're just over 1.4, maybe 1.41, I think.
And what did 1.4 get us? Was that?
Good question. Here we go. 1.4 is the biggest piece was the Taming expansion.
Oh yes.
So that was the new thing we added in at 1.4 is we had already had pets. We'd already had some combat pets, I think.
Yeah.
And the new thing on 1.4 million that we just crossed overnight was that we'll actually let you now go out into the woods and tame a variety of the things you see in the wild. And there'll also be a skill tree associated with taming, to where as you become a better animal tamer, you can tame, you know, grander and grander beasts to then sell off to your friends.
Yeah. Can I tell you a little story about my first pets in UO?
Of course. Absolutely.
So this had to be within the first few days of playing UO. And I came across a cat or a dog. I don't remember which. And I somehow figured out that I could tame it. And I tamed it, and it started following me. And then I was able to rename him. And if it was the dog, I think it was Spunky. And that was my real dog's name. And then I found a cat, and I renamed it Kiki. That was my real cat's name. And I'm like, this is really great. I got my pets in game. And I was so thrilled about that. And then I'm just walking along through Britain, and I find this potion on the ground. And I pick it up, and I'm like, what's this? I double-click it. It's purple. It starts a countdown timer. And so I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. I just throw it out in front of me. And it lands in between both my cat and dog, blows them both up. And I was horrified that I had just killed my cat and my dog.
that is a true tragedy, and as tragic as that was, that really was one of the great joys of early UO was how there were so many of these accidental emergent behaviors, some of which were very pleasant, and some of which were really horrible.
Yeah.
And that's the fine line we're trying to walk here, is make sure we get as much of those in as possible, but also don't let you. Well, I mean, so I'm curious how you reflect on that now with some time. But I'm sure at the time it was nothing but horror.
I was absolutely horrified. I felt like I had just done it to my real life cat and dog in real life, like I had just run over my dog or something like that. And so it was that actually is one of the things about UO, is that was the first game that really got me in some heavy emotions,
right?
And that's one of the brilliant things about it, is that we were able to feel so many things that we had never felt before in a single player RPG, and right. I remember another time where I got so angry because I had this house that had full of vendors, and we had this vendor mall, which I hope to make another vendor mall and have it be glorious. Mm-hmm. So I had this house across the street that was just a small house, and we could still stack things to, I don't know, 34,000 in a stack or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it was this astronomical numbers, and so I had millions and millions of gold worth of product in that little house. And one day I run up to the house, and all of a sudden boxes start appearing outside of my steps. And I'm like, oh crap, someone's about to attack me. There was somebody hiding there, and the boxes kept me from running. And I had already double-clicked my key and was unlocking my door, and they killed me right in my doorway. And then they opened up, and then when I realized it wasn't just one person, they opened up a portal, a gate, inside my house, and all of these people come streaming in. It was really a collective effort. And I remember getting so mad that I slammed my mouse down. And this is back when mice had balls.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I slammed my mouse down, and instantly the top of my hand just started throbbing. I thought, oh crap, I've broken my hand. And so I'm screaming in pain, and I'm screaming about my house being robbed, and then I'm trying to type in ICQ, back as how we communicated long distances in the game. We'd use ICQ, and so I'm like, help, I'm being robbed at the store, And so everybody came in to help, but I had to figure out how to do everything with my keyboard, because my mouse, when I went to move it, all I did was scrape the mouse pad.
That's hilarious.
Man, the days. I mean, I hope that that my dream for the game would be that it is as free form as absolutely possible, to allow me to make as many mistakes as possible and allow for as many unexpected happenings to happen.
Right. Yeah, and we agree with that too. The one exception I'll put to that is for new players. There are people who are just getting in to learn the game. It's unfair to take advantage of them when they really have no idea what's going on.
No killing newbies.
And so, or at least in the newbie maps, etc. And there is also a class of player that says, by the way, I'm really happy to just sit over here and craft. I understand that a lot of people like to go out and be endangered, but don't at least not allow me to play in a way that means I'm not going to have somebody just take all my chips away, or I'll play solo player. Which, by the way, some people can play solo player, and so for those people, we've got it set up for them. Don't worry. But for the majority of people, I agree that after people get started in the game and what I'll call to get their newbie status and out of the newbie area out, we're purposely making the game have a lot of its great value and gameplay in areas of increasing danger, including where you'll want your home will be in areas of increasing danger. And so, and you can move your home, by the way. You can sell the property out from beneath your house and move the whole house, lock, stock, and barrel, decorations included, to another city as we grow the world. And but a lot of the places you might want to move will be places that are a little more hazardous, and those sort of things might happen to you. But it's but we're trying to make sure that just like you've said, We want the world to be as open as possible so that these emergent behaviors come out. And even if some of those emergent behaviors are hazardous, we think that, while it kind of pisses you off in the short term, those are the stories that you always remember and always tell people about.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't much for PvP, but I sure did enjoy being chased by PKers.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just being aware of being willing and able and aware of when those transitions occur. And so it's effectively in a sense a choice that I know that by the way, like for example, let's use the Nightshade example. I'm actually applying it from another part of the game, but since I've already built that scene in your mind, if we were to say that the swamps inherently are dangerous and that the noxious fumes that are in the swamps not only can poison you but sort of drive people mad, and so people end up attacking each other a lot. Well, that's just a fiction of the swamps. So if you want to go to the swamps, you're in a PvP zone, so to speak. And so that's not exactly how we're doing it, but that at least frames it.
Mm-hmm. That would be epically funny to be standing next to your friend and your sword just kind of swings. Sorry, man, it was the fumes. Yeah, so
don't blame me. Really, it was the fumes. Really, trust me. Even if it's not.
How about things like getting drunk in game?
It's funny. People were mentioning that yesterday in a chat that I was doing on our Shroud of the Avatar site, and while we haven't officially written it down on any list, but I think that that's one of my favorite memories out of Ultima Online was when very early on, the servers were having a really hard time keeping up with even 100 people on screen, for example, and so and people were so upset about the poor performance of the servers that instead of quitting the game, they decided to have a protest in game, and they decided Lord British's castle would be a perfect place for this protest. Mm-hmm. And so everybody piled in we the developers had to unlock the front doors of Lord British's castle for them to do this protest, but we were happy to allow them. Mm-hmm. And so everyone goes and basically piles into Lord British's castle, effectively loot the place, but then they also all get really drunk, so their characters are hiccuping and throwing up on the ground. They take off all their clothes, so now they're running around naked, and then they all start yelling obscenities by typing, so the obscenity filter is doing their best. They're trying to do their best to get around the obscenity filter, and so it's a bunch of brawling, destructive, rampaging, drunk, naked, vomiting players. And of course, so many of them came to do it that it also ultimately crashed the servers. And so, to me, in my mind, that's great. It's another kind of form of emergent behavior and expression that we hope to support through this game.
How about so they were voicing their concerns and over whatever. How will we as players be able to deal with that? Are we going to be able to are we going to be able to have any sort of political system, or what do you think about that?
Well, don't forget, UO was the first big MMO, and so it discovered some new issues. And for example, I remember when we hired a woman named Carly, who became the first community coordinator at Origin, and may have been
Stalin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so she was the first of a new breed of employee. And when we went to go hire her, I had to go to my brother and go, "Hey, Robert, we're going to hire a person before this game is even live, and their job is to talk with the community who we think we're going to have as players to listen to what they have to say and keep them happy and tell them what we're doing. So it's a two-way street." And Robert's going, "What? You want me to budget for a person who's not actually making the game?" So dude, that's insane. Mm-hmm. He literally, it was like it had never been done before in gaming. It seemed, it was hard to justify in the usual way, and so we had a really hard time getting one person hired. But here's the metaphor I use that describes the importance of what I'll call that political structure. The city of Austin, where I am now, has about 1 million people in it, and UO, when it launched, got about 1 million people in it. Mm-hmm. So let's use the city of Austin as a metaphor. Okay. Imagine that me and my 30 best friends here at the office decided to go build the city of Austin. Every street, every road, every piece of merchandise on every shop, the price of everything on every shop, how the electrical infrastructure worked, how the sewerage infrastructure worked, whether there were cars or horses or planes, all those things we created. All by just whatever we wanted, we set it up however we chose to. And now you open the doors and say, hey, everybody, come in. And within about a month, 1 million people move into the city. And so now what you have is you have a government, so to speak, of exactly 30 people, no more, no less, and 1 million citizens. Well, what is the probability that people like the taxation rates or the potholes in the street or how the electrical infrastructure works or how the taxation is, et cetera? The odds are zero. People are, of course, going to find things that aren't acting the way that they hoped that it would work. That's effectively guaranteed. Well, now, of course, they want to tell somebody. Well, who are they going to tell? Well, the only people to tell are those 30 people. So they're going to start, 1 million people are going to start emailing those 30 people. And what's the odds they're going to get an individual email back from all 1 million of those people? Again, it's almost impossible. And so we had this, if you compare it to the real world, if you don't like the potholes in your neighborhood or how the trash is being picked up, you have a little neighborhood association that deals with that. Right. And if you don't like, the power that's being distributed to you from the electrical company, you can call the electric company, not even the government, but the electric company usually has somebody who's there to specifically deal with that issue. But even if you need to move up into government, you start with the mayor, down to the city council, down to the neighborhood groups, down to the citizens. And there's a wide variety of other neighborhood groups to like help the homeless or whatever else it might be. There's tons of social infrastructure between the mayor and a citizen. And a virtual world like Ultima Online started with none of that. And so we had to pretty quickly kind of race to catch up. And now we take that much more seriously. So, now, for example, with Fire Lotus, we already have our community coordinator. We only have a prototype of the game done, and we already now have forevermore our community coordinator. And that infrastructure will only grow. And so, for sure, the guild leaders up through our community coordinators up through the development team will be one channel. But what you've also suggested is, should there be, even just amongst players amongst themselves, might there be a political channel? And we've been discussing that too. So we don't have any features at the moment to support it, but we've been discussing, whether over time we can bring in, whether it's democracy, autocracy, or whatever, communism. Whatever, amongst a clan of players as to how they manage themselves within the game.
I've always said that GMs are God, and whatever God wills happens, and that's how I've always, whenever somebody complains, oh, they banned me from the game, well, you shouldn't have pissed off God. Right. Now, there is, like in EVE Online, they have a whole player elected officials and everything. And in fact, they fly them out for a conference once a year and stuff. And they all meet and they plan out things for the next year. And it's pretty heavily involved. I don't know if that's, something like what you would see in here or not, but...
But over time, we might evolve similar kinds of constructs as the game matures. But already what we've done is we've put the developer level, and I think also at the Duke level, I always have to refer to my notes too, even because there's now so many levels. But we have levels at which we're going to invite people just into round tables with us, through things like this, video chats, and because even though we're doing a lot of public dialogue to anybody who's available. But as we go on through the development of the game, we can't always talk to every person individually, and so we're actually letting some players, by virtue of how interested they are in the game, how much they're willing to support the game, we're letting them into that inner circle to where we want to bounce it off to some group of 100 or less players. So let's let people kind of vote their own way in or buy their way in to the inner circle to have influence on how the game develops.
Yeah, I think that'll be great. Let's talk about something that doesn't really have to do with the gameplay, that is more about the infrastructure and such. One of the games that I currently play a lot of, or was playing a lot of, got majorly hacked. And they got the entire server stuff. They got all of our accounts. In fact, the hacker just emailed me today, giving me a dump of the database, and it had all of my personal information in it and everything. And what is your guys' plan for, how things will be secure? It's kind of, this is worst case scenario, I know, but I do know that all games have had all kinds of problems. And what should we expect, or how will you mitigate that?
Well, so there's kind of two issues. One is general data. Another one is financial data and things of that nature that are really dangerous. First of all, we've had a lot of experience with online games. So we built some of the very first online games. So we have a lot of experience with how to do this. And to make sure that the things that are really important, which is your true personal, real-world information, name, address, and the billing information, has to be completely siloed from the rest of the other data. And we already do that. And so we use the same banking level of standards of security around that kind of personal data. And all you can get out of that database through anything other than anything lighter, anything with in a less protected way, is that person's account valid or not? Is really all that needs. All that high security stuff needs to be able to resolve. It's a little less secure when you go over to the game data. Where is your house, et cetera, because that needs to be used dynamically all the time. And so I don't think I think we're pretty good about getting hacked, but that's always an invitation to hackers to go to go try it out. And it's rare to find something that's truly foolproof. But that's what we do, try to layer that to make sure that the real essential stuff of personal data and financial information are kept in a very high security place.
And now I noticed that that in some of the Kickstarter stuff it talked about DRM free. And so what is the plan on that? What do you mean when you say DRM free?
Well, so a lot of our customers were really worried about these digital rights management protections that don't allow them to do things with the code, like move it onto various machines they might own, or make modifications to it, or hack in to see what's on the inside. And we're actually fairly open people. In fact, we think that one of the things that will help us and the community as a game is if people are doing things like saying, "Hey, I've made a little tool that players might like. Let me, release it to the player base, or give it to the Portalarium so they can release it to the player base, or add it to the standards of the game. Something maybe a character displayer, or a inventory management system. Who knows? And so we're not terribly secretive with with the main body of the work. And so since a lot of people were really worried about that, that's why we put it up there to say, no, we're selling you the game. After that, it's your game. If you want to hack it, you can. But by the way, what we won't let you do is hack anything that's going back online. So any of the data that will be part of the persistent world, we'll do our best to make sure that's not hackable.
Now, don't you... Okay, so I remember back UOMap, and it was a great add-on tool that really helped give you just this really massive view of the world while you were playing the game. But at the same time, there was like EasyUO, which helped give you this massive advantage in the game through automation and hacking. So by allowing people to create tools, how are you going to police that?
That's a good question. That we, of course, don't have anything much to police yet. So it's hard to make a broad statement about whether we'll ban or block certain things or otherwise. But for us, the best general plan is we're going to try to create a game where macroing, for example, it doesn't provide any significant advantage. I remember in UO, one of my favorite stories was actually about a macroing thief, where there was this woman who was just starting to play. She was calling out on the help queue that we had at the earliest phases of that game, saying, help, I'm a newbie. Every time I get started, I start over in this town, and every time I walk out of the town, somebody kills me, takes all my stuff, and I've done it like 3 or 4 times in a row now. If it happens to me again, I'm going to quit this game, and I'm never coming back. And so I thought, well, I'll go help this lady. And so I went over as Lord British, and I found her in the town, and I said, "Oh, don't worry, come with me. I'll escort you out of town, and I'll make sure that thief, doesn't prey on you." And right as we were walking out of town, the thief comes zipping by, and he's got enough macros set up to where I don't even know how he's doing this. I mean, he's so fast. I didn't know our game could respond to inputs as quickly as this guy appeared on screen, stole all the stuff from her, and disappeared off of even my screen to where I really couldn't see him to stop him. So I sort of told the lady, stay right here, and I just randomly teleported out ahead in the direction that I saw the guy running, and waited with the freeze command to see if I could catch him on screen. And sure enough, saw him. I froze him down on the ground, and I appeared to him as Lord British. And I said, "Oh, how dare you, thief! This poor young lady has been, you keep stealing from her over and over again, and she really, you're going to run her off from ever playing this game again, and therefore I can't allow you to do that. And if you do it again, I'm going to ban you from the game." And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Lord British. I won't ever do it again." So I said, "Okay, let that be a lesson to you." And I go back to the woman, give her stuff back, and sure enough, the guy macroing again comes zipping by, steals all her stuff a second time. I catch up to him. Freeze him to the ground. I said, "Look, I told you before I was going to ban you if you did this." He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Lord British. I'm a thief. I just couldn't help myself. But really, I swear I won't do it again." I said, "Okay, third time's going to be the charm. If you do it a third time, I assure you I'm banning you." He said, "Okay, I promise I won't do it." I give her stuff back. Sure enough, third time, guy comes by, steals all her stuff. I run him down. I catch him. I freeze him. And I say, "Okay, I'm going to ban you." And then he breaks character for the first time, and he goes, "Okay, Richard Garriott." He said, "By the way, you put the thief skills in this game. Mm-hmm. I was playing in complete accordance with the rules as is defined by the software. Of course, if Lord British shows up, I'm going to say I'll never steal again. But my character is a thief. So as soon as you turn your back, what do you think I'm going to do? Quit being a thief?" And I went, he's actually got a really good point. And so instead of banning him, I teleported him to the complete other side of the planet, just so he couldn't prey on this particular woman. And then I had to go sit back and think about a couple things. One is, how do we want to protect newbies from these roguish behaviors? But it also began our thought process on, how do we make sure that we don't create a game where those who can program the best macros win. And so it is something we want to fight against. We want to support user tools. We don't want to support user advantage.
Right. And how do you feel about farmers and people using bots and stuff like that? What's your response going to be?
So I think gold farming and the bots and the negativity that comes with it, I think is truly a problem. And the reason why it's a problem, or the main reason it's a problem, is because if you were to go into some of the areas of the bots possible without making it a target, such a high target, and some of the ways we're doing that are making sure that for things like if you think about the leveling curve on most MMOs, it's kind of exponential. You know what I mean? A level 10 character is way more than 10 times stronger than a level 1 character, etc. And so you couldn't generally take 10 level 1 creatures and they together can tackle a level 10 character. We're trying to make sure ours is much flatter, much more linear, because ours is again an exploration game, not a I'm more powerful than you game. And so, and similarly, I think from a gold standpoint, I'm still a huge Plants vs. Zombies player. And one of the things even after 4 years of playing Plants vs. Zombies, my total gold in my pocket is still only a few hundred strong, just because I don't care where you are in that game, you really don't make any more money than on any other level, so to speak. It's the gold acquisition is very modest. And so we're going to try to find a way to have our economy be as non-inflationary as possible.
I've never seen that before in a video game.
No, it's hard. Well, I would actually say there is one case example. In fact, one of the guys that works here, but it's Ray Shelley with Wizard 101 has a non-inflating economy, and it's been going for years, and it's still not inflated. But the way he's done it, which is a little bit too draconian for my taste, so we're not going to do this, but we're looking for strategies that will have a similar effect. In his case, you actually don't ever sell something from one player directly to another player, because as soon as you go player to player, they can set the price whatever they want. As soon as they call it a fair trade, and that means that the gold farmers come in, and you have this escalation. His case was that by having the computer always be the intermediary. When I sell a sword, the computer determines the prices it's willing to pay for swords, and then when the computer sells the same or other swords, the computer determines the price on the other side too. So there's not a direct link, and so and it's still player influenceable. If everybody's dumping swords, the general price for swords goes down,
right?
Both to be paid for and otherwise. But it's all within brackets that the computer controls. So he really has succeeded in making a non-inflationary economy, but it feels a little too impersonal for me. And so we're still trying to make sure we sustain, direct player-to-player trade. And so,
I think that's very important. Will you have an economist on the team?
I'm sorry?
Will you have an economist on the team?
Well, we'll have somebody who's in charge of the economy by all means, but whether they're a professional economist, that may or may not be true.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just thinking here about you certainly say a lot of things that get the gears turning in my head. And I reckon back to the days of brokering in Ultima Online and doing all of those things. And back then we really didn't have farming per se when we started. It was hey, look at this. Nobody really knows what it is, and
right.
And we did a lot of selling of houses on eBay and for gold and stuff. And I guess that I would find that I would be very interested in that, but I'm also afraid of it.
Right, and we share that exact perspective, and so there's a couple ways we're going to do it. So, first of all, under the assumption we allow direct player-to-player trade, then inherently gold has a real money value.
Well, and inherently there's theft and fraud that comes in too.
Right, absolutely. So immediately, as soon as you allow any of that, it comes with these problems. But we think those problems are worse if you let the real money go in through eBay, and then I just give you, you and I agree that I will hopefully give you something of similar value in the game world, because that's when I might give you something that's not so valuable or nothing at all.
Right.
And so more fraud will come up, and more fraud that we have no idea what it is, if we force you to go to eBay to make the back end of that connection. And so whatever economic connections are made between players, whichever ones we allow and under what circumstances we allow, we think it needs to happen in-game. And by doing it in-game, I think it will decrease the fraud. It also lets us do something like saying, why are the gold farmers, if you want to buy gold in the game, why don't we sell it, versus someone else? And so, that's one of the things we're still trying to figure out, is what's the fair way to either block, farming, making sure that farming literally just is not possible, or to the degree that there's going to be an inflating economy and or farming, people are motivated to buy gold, or frankly, it can even happen with real estate trades. We really want to do that in game as much as possible, just to control it. And it's better for us economically at the same time.
I always think about these things, about how it could be handled, and I think of forcing order into disorder, and not allowing, the game not allowing anything that's an unwanted action, which I know is very difficult to do. Victor Kisley, who's the CEO of Wargaming, made World of Tanks, which turned out blew up into a huge game, no pun intended. He talked about bots in a very interesting way. He says that he fully allows them because they make great cannon fodder, and legitimate players need other players to shoot at.
Right.
And so I guess that was just my thoughts on, if I were to embark on that, I'd be like, okay, how can we incorporate them into the whole mixture of things, and keep them in a channel, or at least a little bit controlled for positive, rather than the whole fighting to try and keep them out, and they keep springing up, whack-a-mole.
Right, I agree. And but in the case of the tank bots, I suspect that on the whole they're usually less skillful than real people, because it's pretty hard to make an AI bot that is really good, although its processing speed will be as good or better than any other human. In an RPG where it's not your, don't forget, World of Tanks is a real-time shooter. It's a first-person shooter effectively, but as a tank. Right. And so it is literally your dexterity against the other tanks, and tanks are inherently, kind of slow, lumbering, clunking machines. But I think if you were to take that same metaphor to certain first-person shooters with sniping ability, etc., that a bot in a first-person shooter could probably kill every real player. if properly equipped and operating. And so I'm not sure we can get to the point where a bot won't be a worthy foe, and especially if it's level 10 or 15. Bots will eventually get to very, very high levels, and as long as they can interact with you ad hoc, there's a problem that will inherently be there. But what we're trying to do is as opposed to letting what I'll call creativity get poured into bots. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather let creativity and real value being earned out. First of all, don't forget the people out of China that were making those bots were doing it because they could go to eBay and make real money.
Right.
So real money would come in through eBay to them, which is why it happened. As soon as you allow commerce directly through us into the game, you don't need to go to those guys. So I think we can cut off a lot of their motivation just by shortcutting their economic loop. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, what I'm trying to do is make sure, and you saw it in one of the, let's see, all the world's a stage level. Where is that one coming up here? If we get to 1.9 million. So if we get up to 1.9 million, what we want to do is, there were theaters in Ultima Online, but the theaters were generally chaotic because people in the audience could jump up on stage, people in the audience could jump and scream and yell. You couldn't keep them off the stage, and there wasn't a very good puppeteering to your own character to be put on very good play at all. But we're trying to put in musical instruments. We're in one of our other stretch goals, so we're hoping to let people put in limited actual painted art that they put in the game and could sell as one-off non-copyable pieces. And so I'm hoping that by putting things into the game context, we'll let creative people earn value back by making things that are cool for everybody else. So that's what we want to do, is let people earn value by expressing their creativity into the game.
With that said, I think that men and women look at games differently. And will you be trying to embrace both sexes? I mean, will you be putting any things that are specifically geared towards men or specifically geared towards women?
Well, I think that we'll just, without trying, end up putting in things in for men by all means, just because we've been, that's what we've been doing for 30 years. Mm-hmm. So that's not the challenge. The challenge is, what do we do to support women? Mm-hmm. And as you probably know, UO was a real gender boundary breaker when it came out. In that, previous games, even my own previous games, the number, the best guesses we had on how many women were playing was on the order of 5%, right? Maybe probably less. And I think that with UO we actually got up to a whopping 15% might have been 20% at sometimes, but at least considerably higher than 5%. So there was a marked difference already with UO, and now we're to the point where women now finally make up an even bigger percentage of gaming. And if you go all the way to social games, women actually make up the majority of gamers in social gaming. Mm-hmm. And so, do we want to put things in to support them? Absolutely. Are we going to do that at the cost of supporting the more hardcore gamer market? No, because this is a traditional Ultima for traditional players, you might say. That being said, the market has expanded. Women are playing even this kind of role-playing game now more, and so absolutely we want to hear from them and develop for them to make sure there are roles. I mean, one of the beauties of a sandbox style game like I like to create is that there's whole niches of activity for a wide variety of different play styles and play types, and so by all means, women should be one of those. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my wife talked about whether or not she'd be able to farm in the game, not farming gold, but plants.
Right. Well, but you already saw, one of our stretch goals we already have out included the immortality fruit.
Right, right. I did an episode on that, and people were like, "Oh, it's pay to win."
No, but I know, and we've heard that too. Except that really, it's the way I look at it is there's a healing potion, right? Everybody's seen healing potions in games, and so all we're saying is we have a healing potion that looks like a piece of fruit, but as opposed to being consumed and gone and have to now go buy another, you can take the seed that was inside that healing potion, so to speak, healing fruit, and go plant it in the ground, come back tomorrow, and get another piece of healing fruit. So, come on, that is not pay to win.
Will we have these? Will we have a pot that we can place in our house that we do that, or in our bank box, or what happens if I'm homeless and I've got this immortality seed? Where do I plant it?
You've correctly identified that we either have to have communal areas that people can farm, or a little potted plant you can carry around with you. The same that we haven't figured out all those details, but yes, no matter what, you would fear not. You will have if you have the immortality fruit, you will be able to plant it and recover it, and nobody else will steal it. But it will be. It's part of the quote farming mechanic.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about rare items.
Mm-hmm.
So. In one of the absolute brilliant mistakes in Ultima Online was the fact that, like, when the servers first came up, there were certain things that could be picked up that were never spawned again, and then at server restarts, certain things would appear again, and other things would kind of naturally respawn. We weren't sure how often, but I remember we would collect horse dung, because it was a rare item, and we would sell it for a lot of gold. And it was just because you wanted to be able to place some horse dung on your step or something like that of your house, or just to show off that you had some wealth and you had one of these. There was rocks. There was a door to the Dungeon Doom. There was the singing statues that would repeat anything that was said around them. Mm-hmm. And everything. And what is your vision on that? Because I have to say, it feels very fake when you intentionally put rare items in the game, as opposed to.
As opposed to what?
Well, none of those were intentional that I know of.
No, well, most of those weren't. Most of those were an exploit that you could find to replicate an object or things of that nature.
Which I got banned for in Ultima Online 7 years after I last played the character. Can you believe that? They were doing some test, and they banned me 7 years after I last played the character because I had some duped items in my backpack.
How hilarious! Well, yeah. They were doing a sweep, but there's no question that there will be bugs of who knows if we'll manage to keep duplicates out, but odds are there'll be a few exploits here and there, and whatever they might be, and we'll do our best to clean them up and take them back and put them away. But if you skip the exploits ones, because those are again
right. That's not within the spirit of the game.
Right. However, to say that there would be an artisan somewhere in the mountains where you could go buy or gather, or once every literally blue moon, that comes up into the sky. If you happen to be there, they will generate one new singing sculpture that they sell to whoever the first player is that happens to be around them during this once every blue moon event, and therefore you can take it back to your house and set it in front of your house. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And so if you're saying, can objects be rare? I think yes, objects can and should be rare, even by frequency of generation, not just on dollar value. And so we're even doing that with the example I just mentioned with Nightshade. You have to wait until it's full moon during the rain to go search the swamps for Nightshade. Mm-hmm. And so and by making things that are rare or have a frequency, an uncommon frequency of generation, you encourage people to think about it and remember it. Mm-hmm. If they actually want to go find it. And that also then it creates a whole set of tensions also, because especially if those are in hazardous areas, then you have to go, okay, 2 to 3 nights from now,
it's a blue moon and there's 50 people there to collect.
So what am I going to do to make sure I'm first in line? I have to think about that one.
Kill all the rest.
I have to PvP or kill the rest. Yeah. But that's my point. You don't have to go do it if you don't want it. And that's what I'm saying is about this kind of voluntary participation. If it's in a PvP area, you're going like, okay, whoever the last man standing is at the top of the mountain at the blue moon, that's who's going to get the opportunity to buy that statue. Well, now they got something really valuable. Now they can trundle back into town and sell it. So if you don't want to go into that area, don't. But I'll bet you can find one to buy for a very high price in town. And that high price is what motivated a lot of people, to be willing to take the risk of going up there into that area.
Right. Speaking of high prices, what do you envision? Okay, so I don't think in the Kickstarter campaign we've had enough pledges that we're using up all of the homestead spaces. And so when the game launches, how will someone buy a plot of land? And then what will they do with it?
Well, whether we sell them all or not, I mean, people will eventually probably want to still sell theirs, and so there will be realtors in the game who, when a lot is for sale, like, well, as it works right now, I mean, this may or may not be the way it is in the long term, is there's a for sale sign in front of the lot that says, hey, there's lots available, and you can choose to buy it or not. So fundamentally, that'll be it. But it ultimately will go down to, or up or down to, supply and demand. The only thing we're really worried about and trying to make sure we manage well is deployment on day one, because we don't necessarily want to make it to where he who happens to be at the right time zone to be awake at the time to rush in and have enough money in their pocket to buy it gets it. If we think we're going to run out of real estate, which I think is actually still very likely, we may, we've talked about going to a lottery system where we give people an option, in kind of random order, so over a few days, to where you don't have to be online at that exact moment. And even for the Kickstarter, what we're doing is we're going to, because even if you have a city deed, you can actually elect to use that deed, that property deed, anywhere you want in the world. It just includes cities, and so we're going to make sure the city people get to go in first. So we're going to give them an hour or a day ahead of town people, an hour or a day ahead of village people, to select which is their initial lot where they want to live. And so your contribution level sort of determines the order in which you'll be able to select your lot. That way we don't have, again, just a mad rush all at the exact same time where, again, people can be blocked inappropriately.
And how does that look if I have a city deed compared to a village deed? Is my house the same size in a city as it is in a village, or how does that work?
So always think of the two pieces. There's the property upon which you are building, and the actual house that you have. And the actual house is always can be put away, so to speak, and put up again on some other piece of property. And so we think that the actual thing of value is really the property, because that's the thing that's unlimited. You can always change houses, and 50 people could buy all the same houses, other than any limited edition stuff we put out. As a general rule of thumb, you can select amongst the variety of houses that are available. We're not going to stop you from buying a house that looks like somebody else's house, so to speak. But the lot that is right next to City Hall in the middle of the main town of the main island, there's only one of those. There's exactly what that it is where it is. It's if you're a crafter of any kind, location right, is where the value comes from. So your property deed is a separate piece of paper from the house itself. So if you ever want to move, you can store your house away, remove your deed from this unused piece of property, and go to any other same as you own or lower level of property, buy that piece of property, and redeploy your exact same house there if you wish. The difference in the house between what you nominally get in the village and what you can nominally get in the city is that out in the villages, your house will be a relatively small, I'm speaking metaphorically, not precisely, a little one-room cabin with a, perhaps a little farm plot in the back and maybe a little picket fence with a garden in the front. So it might be very nice for a farmer, or if you're just looking for a cozy little nest in the woods, but you won't be able to buy there the same thing like you could do for a two-story. If you go to the city lot, there's a two-story mansion that fills most all of the lot. It probably doesn't have a garden. But because most people don't, the value of city property is such that you don't generally reserve room for the farming activities in the major metropolitan area. But you could still take that house. The lot size is still within the set of parameters that would allow you, if you wanted to deploy your house in any of the other cities, villages, towns in the world. So by owning a city lot, it means you can really live anywhere.
Okay. Unfortunately, I only have a village.
You can live in any village.
Yes, I can live in any village. So, okay.
Change your mind and move all you want.
What's that?
And change your mind and move around all you want.
So, Now, what is the cost of these going to look like? Because if like all of the land is sold out at the beginning, then is not when a piece of property becomes available, isn't it going to be some astronomical price?
It could be, and I think that there's really only a couple of answers to that. We could either, if you look at UO in its early days, you either let the entire world be buildable, in which case slowly but surely the world is full of lots of boring, endless tracts of pretty crummy houses that people have built and largely are abandoned, or at least not cared for well, that begin to litter the countryside. That's one extreme. The other extreme, which is something we're closer to, is that that you can't literally just build a house, edge to edge across the country. In which case, there's a far more limited number of places you can build, and we've opted for that. But which doesn't mean we can't keep building islands and towns for people so that we can try to stay ahead of the demand for places to live. We just think that it will be hard to stay ahead of that demand because, again, instead of having a multi-sharded universe where you can keep making more and more copies of the world, we really want everybody to live in the same world. So you can, when anyone becomes your friend over time, you can run into. And if you don't have that problem of, hey, they're on a different shard, so I'll never see them, period. There is only one shard. But that also means that since every lot is still unique to the metaverse, the demand for those lots will even go higher. And so we're hopeful that, hopeful is not really the right word. We're thinking even if we're modestly successful, that property is going to be the thing that's in short supply. And so we will, continue to build as much as we can to stay ahead of it. But we think that one of the arguments why Kickstarter is a good time to get in for property is that once we actually have any actual live players, even like right now, if you look at, we have 18,000 or so backers, and I'm confident we don't have currently within the towns that we have 18,000 lots, plots. And so that's the problem we have. And so there's been people have been lobbying to get us to consider doing things like have instanced rooms in an inn that therefore don't take up room in the landscape and things of that nature, just so they can at least have a place to throw their backpack when they're offline. We're not yet prepared to go down that path, but if we can't stay ahead of demand that badly, we may have to consider something like that.
And so what about somebody who's, now I'm assuming that we can only own one piece of property per account.
We were having a discussion about that down the hall just today, and we're not sure that that's the case. And okay. So why do you ask? So
okay, so a friend of mine who is very enterprising in Second Life, what he did was he bought his own servers, he paid for his own servers, and then he segmented out the land and rented out the different lots. And he rented it out for real dollars, and he quadrupled his money every month. And there was a bit of management of all of that, but he actually turned it into a business and was making some fair change doing that.
Right.
So, if I'm enterprising, can I start buying up pieces of property and renting them out?